Well, in this lecture I'll show you how to set up the Jupyter notebook, or Jupyter for short, and also how to use it. So far you've worked both with a Python or an IPython interactive shell, but also you've worked with an editor such as Atom. Sometimes you may have the need for a hybrid between an interactive shell and an editor, when you want to test things out, but you also want to save your blocks of code that you're writing. Because an interactive shell is great for testing things quickly, but you can save the code, and the editor is good for saving the code, but it's not great for testing things. But I can tell you that such a hybrid tool exists, and that is called Jupyter Notebook. And that is an amazing tool that will boost your productivity. And Jupyter is especially good when you're working with data, as it's a great environment to explore data, and you'll see its usefulness in just a bit. Of course, you still want to use editors such as Atom when you're working with multiple Python scripts that interact with each other. That's the case of web application, for example. When you're developing web applications, you'll have to deal with multiple Python scripts and also HTML files, CSS, and other files as well. We'll build a web application later in the course, and you'll see how Atom is good for that. But for data, use Jupyter. So Jupyter, let's see how to install it. Well, you can go to the installation, so install, and you can go through these instructions. But instead of going through this, I would advise you actually to use your command line to install Jupyter, and typing pip install Jupyter. So that will download Jupyter and it will install it in your system. And then to start a Jupyter session, a good practice is to go to a folder. Let's say test3, and here you can open a command prompt, and then you type Jupyter notebook, and that will open a Jupyter session in the browser. So the Jupyter notebook is actually a browser notebook. The reason I opened the Jupyter notebook in the command line was that at least on Windows, when you do Shift and then right click on folder, your command prompt is opened in the current folder, so in this one here. And then when you create a notebook file now, every file will be saved in this directory here. Alternatively, you can open your command prompt everywhere you want, and then you can cd to the folder where you want to save your Jupyter notebooks. Alright, now we don't have anything here. So what you can do is create a notebook, and we install Jupyter as a Python library, so under notebooks we have Python 3 available. So the kernel will be Python 3. If you have associated other languages here, you'll see them under here, under notebooks. So this is an empty notebook. And this is the name of the notebook, and you can change this to, let's say, testing. Press OK. And if you go to the folder, you'll see that a file with testing name and IPython notebook extension was created. So that is created automatically every time you type something here, you do some changes or something. Now let me show you how you can work with the IPython notebook. So you can consider every cell, this is a cell, and you can consider every cell as a line in a normal Python shell. But here in this shell you can actually write multiple lines of code. Let's say print 1, and then if you don't want to execute this right away, you can press enter. So with enter you enter a new line in the cell, and then print 2, and so on. And if you want to execute the cell now, you can press Ctrl enter, and you get the output. Now if you want to create a new cell, Alt enter would do that. And here you can write another block of code. With enter you go to the next line, and so on. And if you want to go to the next cell right away, So before we pressed Control Enter, now you can press Shift Enter and you go to the next cell automatically. And with Shift Enter you also execute the cell where you were working on. You can create new cells with Alt Enter, and you can delete them by pressing first you press Escape and then you press DD 2 times. DD again. So it's quite flexible. Something you should notice is that we have two modes, basically. We have the command mode. So when you are in the command mode, you see a gray rectangle around the cell. And when you are to go to the edit mode, then you press enter. So while you are focused on the current cell, you press enter and then you edit the cell. So in edit mode, when you type things, you're inserting text in the cell, you're inserting code in the cell. Escape and command mode, DD, and you delete the cell. Alt enter and you enter a new cell. So these are the most used shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, but if you want to know more shortcuts, you can go to help and then keyboard shortcuts, and then you see a list here. But these are good to get started. When you're done with this, you can just close a tab, and you can also close the directory tree here. So notice that Jupyter actually opens in a localhost session, and if you want to open again your notebook, so you can go here again and go to open command window here and Jupyter notebook. And here is the file, and it's just as we left it. Now a Jupyter notebook is best used for doing explorations, and especially data explorations. So if you're working, let's say, with data analysis or data visualizations, the Jupyter notebook is perfect to use. You can use the Jupyter notebook, for example, to load a table of data in the session. And for that you'd use pandas. So you import the library, you press enter or shift enter to go to the next cell, and you press enter again to write something. So let's say df equals to pandas.read csv, and I have a csv file somewhere in my system. Press enter and whoa. So you get a nice HTML table which was loaded from the CSV file, and you can also plot graphs in the Jupyter notebook. So that's also something you're learning in the course. And so data analysis and visualizations, you can also use the Jupyter notebook for web scraping. And that is very convenient because you have these blocks of code, and then you have to continuously tweak the code. So you may want to change something here, and then you get a nice display. Not this one exactly, because this is a messed up string, but this one, for instance, you have a slider here, so you can scroll up and down inside a separate window that doesn't affect your general your main window. So I hope you've gotten a good idea of the Jupyter notebook. Just take a note of the shortcuts, of the keyboard shortcuts to execute code, the edit and the command mode, enter, escape, and enter again, and so on and so forth. And you just practice them a little bit, and you'll get used with Jupyter very quickly. See you in the next lecture.